All right. Get started. Hello. Get the phone going now. I just love, I don't know what you can call it, but whatever is in the background, that brother's voice going Black Lions, because it's such a strong, first of all, just the imagery, Black Lions, and just the symbolism of it. Is something I totally feel, and it's like great energy for getting into these conversations, because we are Black lions and lionesses, and however we identify there, but that power, that creativity, and just awesomeness, just awesomeness. I don't know if y'all seen a lion before, but there are some awesome creatures. That's the word that always comes to mind when I think of lions. Like, these are awesome. And so with that, greetings to everyone. Happy holiday season. We're in the season of all kinds of holidays. There's like 50,000 of them happening. The biggest one being Christmas, of course, for obvious reasons. But there's a bunch of others that are going on during this period with very interesting histories. As you know, we will definitely mention. So whatever you're celebrating, even if it's just life on another day, um, on a regular day, even if you don't celebrate anything, but hey, I'm still here standing. Look, we are celebrating with you and saying, yo, we're glad you're here standing too. And thank you for taking some time out of your experiences, your celebrations, your observations to be with us on today, AIM Art. I am your host, as always, Dr. Ijeoma Nodimapara, she, her, all, calling in from the unceded lands of the Anishinaabe in the territory of Wawiatanong or Detroit. And also recognizing, that I'm a daughter of Dr. Joseph and Mrs. Ngozi Nodim, and wife of Nkem Chika, mom of Ugochinyere, Bubechi, and Chimamanda, and just honoring my Igbo, African, and diaspora ancestors, communities, and descendants at this moment. I'm, as always, still am physician, scholar, scientist, artist, activist, coach, consultant, speaker, mom, and wife. And my personal, professional, and business mission in life is to dismantle white supremacism and white supremacist delusion, aka white violence, white terrorism, by eliminating anti-black racism from medicine, healthcare, public health, and the sciences, while centering and celebrating black brilliance, black abundance, and black joy locally and globally. And another piece too is also being part of the body of people, a liberated body of people that are creating something better. And I think that's something very important to lift up, that we're not just in the business of dismantling and ending and eliminating, but we are also creating. We're also building. We are also producing. We are creating that which is better, with that which is a better way. Okay. So thank you for being here again here at the round table. The anti-racism in action round table is what we're moving to. I just sort of, specifying, because through these many conversations, yes, there's a focus in medicine and healthcare, but we're recognizing that truly, as always, we've always known this. It is interrelational, it's interdependent, it's intersectional with pretty much every sector in life. And so we want to send the message that even though, yeah, there's a focus on medicine and healthcare, and we recognize medicine and healthcare and academia being the crucible of white supremacism, but we want to name that there's a space here for those in from various backgrounds, from the law, from the arts, from the grassroots, from wherever. We want to name that there's a space here for those folks too. So the anti-racism in action roundtable is who we are, and we are a multi-professional. Speaking of that, what I just said, transdisciplinary, meaning we cut across all sectors, disciplines, professions, and backgrounds. Community of unapologetically Black and unapologetically pro-Black, liberatory, pan-African, Afrocentric, Afro-optimists. That means that we celebrate and center Black magic, Black brilliance, Black excellence, truth, joy, strengths, assets, abundance, and possibilities, as well as creativity and future dreaming. And so we're committed to developing the innovative knowledge, skills, attitudes, and tools to inform transformative actions towards eliminating anti-Blackness in medicine, healthcare, public health, and the sciences. Our principal organizing tenet is Ubuntu, meaning community. I am because we are. And we're here every 1 to 2 Saturdays. We weren't here last Saturday for obvious reasons, being the holiday. But we're back here this week. And speaking of that, let me just look at the calendar real quick to let you know we'll be here next week as well, the 10th and the 10th. I would just record 17th. I'm out of town, and we will not be here on the 24th because of again Christmas, 31st, New Year's Eve. So really, to next week will be our last amen of the year, and then we will be back for the new year 2023, all guns blazing, badder and more fire than ever. So I'm excited. I hope you are too, for our last show coming up next week, and then for 2022, and then moving on from there. Just want to shout out. So again, every 1 to 2 Saturdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time is where we're here on Twitter Space and on YouTube, streaming on LinkedIn and Twitter Live, as well as on YouTube. Yeah, just said that. Partnerships. Shout out to iloveblackpeople.com. Shout out to Canada US Coalition to End Race Correction in Healthcare. Shout out to Black Dog Village, Ready for Black Lives. Shout out to National Resident Council, Ubuntu Black Family Health Center, Hood Medicine Initiative, and Black Mental Health Alliance of Nashville. Shout out to Health Equity and Justice in Medicine of Wayne State University School of Medicine and Opara Speaks. And shout out to the White House Health Equity Leaders Roundtable as well. So we're about to get into our topic for today. And, that's usually the housekeeping, just kind of like level setting that we do every time we're on, just to get folks all acclimated and reminded of our principles and what guides our conversations and how and why we show up in this space the way that we do. And so it's really critical that that's just a reminder and is set as an orientation for everyone every single time we show up. Just to let you know, of note, please pay attention to the Jumbotron. We are a resource sharing community. So if you got resources or you have events or activities and things like that related to the topic, you want to definitely share that. You can post on the Jumbotron or the dashboard. We usually talk amongst ourselves in the round table. Right now it's going to be myself and Dr. Drew. And as you come on as a speaker, you are welcome to share those resources. If you are just feeling the spirit before you come on as a speaker, feel free to DM me those resources. I'll happily post them on the Jumbotron or the dashboard or the Nest, as different people call it. We are also streaming, like I said, on our website, etc. I'm going to post those on the Jumbotron, those links. So if you want to see my beautiful face, ignore my voice, y'all. Like, I have this chronic bronchitis that has been assailing me for the past month. And part of why it's chronic is I know my immune system is compromised by stress and fatigue, because your girl is tired. And I was just commenting to Dr. Drew about that. Like, I am recognizing tiredness and exhaustion in my body, and really do need to be intentional about rest in these next few weeks, reflective rest. So I am making a note to self that I need to make arrangements for retreat, so that I can rest up, and I hope that you all are doing the same as well. Please do. Y'all have worked so hard this year. I don't know exactly what y'all are doing, but I just know you Black in this world, you are working hard already by staying awake, okay, and just keeping upright. You are working hard. So I just want to shout you out and encourage y'all to do to be taking care of yourselves, and for me to also take my own advice as well. As always, tweet and tag Amart, tweet it out, invite your friends to the space, send your DMs, and again, publicize your work and upcoming events. So let's get into the topic for today. We got the phenomenal, amazing, awesome Dr. Michelle Drew in the building, as always, a fiery goddess here. And, she proposed this topic, actually, really proud of to say that. And this was in the spirit of when we were talking about the pulse oximetry, and y'all remember how we dissected and the issue of the pulse oximetry. And just as a reminder for those who might be tuning in and not was not aware of this conversation, again, you can go back on the YouTube archives to look that up. But we talked about how the pulse oximetry, a tool that's used to measure the oxygen amount of oxygenation in our bodies, are biased against darker skins, or shall I say browner skins. I'm actually trying to get away from this whole dark light like language. And so browner skins, and and how it does not pick up occult hypoxemia, meaning that it will measure more oxygen that actually is in the body. So keep in mind that this was a tool that was used to screen and make medical decisions, but like all the time, basically, but especially during COVID, as to who can be admitted to the hospital or not, or who gets medication or not. We were making decisions on who gets medicines or who is admitted based on the amount of, like, no matter your symptoms, but are you hypoxemic or hypoxic, meaning do you have low oxygen or not? And we were using a tool that was not calibrated for browner skin and that was missing folks that have low oxygen and measuring it as higher oxygen in folks with browner skin. We were using that tool and sending folks away. And then when we were disproportionately affected by the pandemic, be all shocked and amazed and say, what is it about brown people? What is it about Black people that they just be dying more? Right? And we do not have that introspective look at ourselves. And so we unpacked why this was an issue that we've known for decades. It's not new. It's not new. This has been an issue that was brought to the fore for decades. And and yet and still was perpetuated, because anti-Blackness is written into the very fabric of medicine, healthcare, sciences, academia, just as it's sewn into the fabric of society. And so there's no way that we discriminate, right? So no, it's perfect. Technology is perfect, science is perfect, and we're perfect. The problem is the people. The people are broken somehow, they're deficits somehow, so we have to go and fix them. That is the mantra and the thinking that pervades much of American slash, I get Western. I'm just going to use that loosely because, again, who determines what is West, East, North, or South, right? And so saying all that to say that the pulse oximetry is one of many tools, right? And we talked about the spirometer, which is the pulmonary function test machine. It measures lung capacity and helps us to diagnose a variety of lung disease, and how that has roots in anti-Blackness and racism, based on the belief that Black folks have lower capacity, lung capacity, and that was based on the dumbest thought process from Thomas Jefferson that influenced a very prominent American physician and physician scientist, Dr. Samuel Cartwright, who was the creator of all these diagnoses of nonsense, such as drapetomania, and I wrote a paper on that, and other diseases that he made up to explain when enslaved Africans did the things that human beings do when they're oppressed, such as run away from their oppression. And he gave that a diagnosis. When an enslaved African runs away, it's drapetomania, it's madness. How would you run away from your natural calling? That's not normal. So what is the treatment? Whip the hell out of them and get them to recognize that their God-given biological calling or nature is to be enslaved to white-bodied people. So these are the folks, and this same the guy was instrumental in the creation and the sort of propagation of the spirometer, which is the pulmonary function test machine that we use to today, calibrated to adjust for quote unquote race. So you come in a brown skinned person, you get a whole different like calibration of the machine to accommodate for the fact that you have presumed lower lung capacity. And there's a whole wonderful expose, shall I say, about this written in the book, I've been Breeding Race into the Machine by Lundy Brown. And she did a recent speaking engagement presentation in Canada. And they should have the recording on their site. I'll post that later. So I'm saying all this to say that there are numerous examples of the ways technology and healthcare and medical devices have anti-Blackness and white supremacism baked into its very nature, and we still use that and perpetuate these beliefs of racial biological difference that don't exist. Let me name that, except when it's manufactured by the very devices or clinical algorithms that are based on the assumption of biological difference where there truly is none, right? But that is then produced inside of technology, inside of devices, right? And then perpetuated to create disparities of healthcare and health. And again, there's difference between healthcare disparities and health disparities, and there's a lot of overlap. And I think many of the ways that these topics, these specific topics we're discussing, are examples of the overlap. But understand that there's healthcare disparities where the healthcare experiences are different from different groups of people, and then which then results in health outcomes that are disparate in those different groups of people. So this is really important. And so today we're going to lift up one of those tools. And what I'm really excited also about this tool and this particular topic is it's particularly dealing with children. I think oftentimes we do talk generally, and I think we, of course, all the topics and all the discussions that we have impact children as well, but we don't name it specifically, right? Children are people. They're not adults, and they're not little adults, right? Children are children, but they're also part of the human family, right? And we often don't name that though, and I think there needs to be, we need to give them that honor. Children are gifts, and they're in my culture we say they're spirits, they're spirits too. And so and it's important to name how things specifically impact them, especially based on the pediatric principle that children are not adults. So things impact them differently. They experience life and the world differently. They experience racism and then manifest it or perpetuate it differently, and it's important to name that and give space to that. So I'm really excited that we get to do that today, because even though the topics and discussions we have do impact them, of course, we don't particularly name them. I think that we need to give them that honor. And so we're going to talk about this tool called the bilitool. We're going to break down what it is, why it's important, the condition of hyperbilirubinemia that it's used to detect. And hyperbilirubinemia is when we have high bilirubin levels in our body. And we're going to talk about what that is in a bit, and why this tool is used to detect and therefore treat it in order to save lives, and how it perpetuates just in a similar way as its cousins, its other device cousins, right? The pulse ox, the spirometer, and a number of other machines and devices and technologies that presume biological difference and then bake it, produce it, reproduce it, and exacerbate this wrong belief and produce these disparities. And then we're going to freedom dream, as we always do in this space. What can we do differently? How do we create different? How do we address this disease condition in human babies, period, that accommodates for and addresses the variety of skin tones and other realities? And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm so excited to do that with my sister, my peer mentor, my friend, the one and only Auntie Dr. Michelle Drew in the house to really break this down for her. And again, she produced this topic. I helped me to get acquainted with it. So she's going to be leading a lot of conversations. I'm just going to be guiding, but we are learning at her feet on today. Okay. And so with that, Auntie Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself and let the people know the awesomeness that you are? One of the few nurses, midwives, nurse practitioners who are also professors in the School of Medicine. She teaches physicians to physicians, physicians. I made that up to do their work, and is a powerhouse. She works on in Congress. She's advocating on the highest levels when it comes to reproductive justice, from the grassroots, honey, to the Congress tops, shall we say, and everything in between. She's in education, she's in advocacy and activism. She is founder of Ubuntu Black Family Health Center, one of the premier centers for really lifting up Black maternal health and prioritizing it through an abolitionist and libertarian lens. I mean, we have such an incredible, just divine spirit here with us, and we are grateful to have her here. So, Sister Michelle, I'm probably left one or two things out. Can you go ahead and break it down for the peoples before we enter into this topic on today?
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in this creation that we call Earth. I'm so glad to be with you. As like my sister, Dr. Opara, I'm struggling with a little hoarseness, but I think it gives me kind of a Kathleen Turner, maybe Tina.
I love it. Yes, that's so true.
As she mentioned, I'm a certified nurse midwife and family nurse practitioner by training. I'm a ordained minister and Black liberation theologian by calling, and an unapologetic defender of one of the things that I love most, which is Pan-Africanism and Blackness, and how we move forward as people, as a community, as an Ubuntu, by unapologetically claiming freedom from the systems that do us harm, whether that's education, politics, economics, and in this case, medicine. I am located today on what is unceded land of the Henalopen people and the Delaware tribes that are known as today Wilmington, Delaware, a city that is 60% African American, and 80% of those households are headed by Black women, where their multi-generational homes are where our lived experience is much different than the rest of the state, even though we are the largest city in the state. And if you open up your wallets, your purses, your mail, and look at anything related to credit, and probably anything corporate, you'll see the city Wilmington, Delaware listed, because Delaware is famous for basically being a tax haven. So there are more corporations incorporated in the state of Delaware than there are people. There are more than 1 million corporations, and many of them, including two of the famous that you know, Twitter and Amazon, are incorporated here and pay absolutely no taxes into the system. And so we have a disparity where the average Black person in the city of Wilmington earns less than $30,000 a year, and the median income for the state is $60,000 plus per year. So we are home to the largest health system in the state, which also has several ACGME residency programs, including family medicine and obstetrics and gynecology, both of which provide reproductive health services. And in that same city that, as I mentioned, was 60% Black and 75% people of color, because there's about 12% Latinx and 3% Asian. Currently in our residency program, where I have 27 residents that I call myself responsible for teaching. One is Ghanaian American and one is African American. There's one South Asian, and the rest are all white. So as you can imagine, I'm frequently in trouble when I have talks like this, because I point out to them that to only have one South Asian physician in a residency program of 28 you are trying. You have to try hard to be racist to tell me that you can't find a qualified Nigerian American, Ghanaian American, or South Asian physician in the Northeast. Like, where? How is it possible? So, helping them, helping the system to confront is, less easy. But mentoring the residents that I do have, especially those that identify as white and who are not representative of our community, to understand their responsibility, not just to be ethical human beings or to be culturally competent, or to just not be racist, but to actually employ and embody anti-racism throughout their practice, to have it be part of their praxis as they're deciding how they learn, how they interact, and how they are going to move forward and function in this city, whether it be for just 4 years or 7 if they stay for one of our 2 fellowships, or how they're going to go through the world and make it a better place than their parents and grandparents did. Because I tell you, every day something new makes me just shake my head and wonder what's going to happen to this world, especially with the world that we as baby boomers and Gen X are leaving behind. And, of course, it's not a case in point, but not a medical, as you talked about. It's just more than medicine. I think for the people who are interested in the royal family and Buckingham Palace, we had that incident this week where one of Queen Camilla's old ladies in waiting, basically assaulted a British woman who was there for an event, who was an activist and working hard in the community of Black and Asian and minority ethnic people there in London, had been invited to Buckingham Palace and proceeded to not only do the "but where are you really from," but touched her. And of course, it's
what touched her? Did she touch her hair? I didn't know that. Did she touch her?
She touched her hair, but then also when apparently as the encounter was going back and forth and the woman wouldn't give her an answer, she put her hand on her arm and said, "Oh, I see we're going to have a problem with this one," as if they would, somehow call security to have her moved. So I'm just like, lady, if you'd have put your hands on me. But, currently on my thread and in my DMs is some crazy woman who's calling herself the crazy cat lady because she when another white man jumped in to defend her and say, but she's 80, meaning she's 80 and therefore she's allowed to be racist. Some white woman decided to come in this thread and start, continuing to defend these 2 people. And as I'm telling her, ma'am, this is 2022. She's like, well, people of our generation, we were raised to believe that's okay. And, to see how insidious that is. So as we think about who are training the physicians today, who are training nurses today, who are training advanced practice nurses, PAs, physical therapists, pick a occupation. The people who hold the most power in medical education, in nursing education, and health education today are people not only like the woman who put her hands on and touched the hair of a Black woman and said that she couldn't really be British because she wasn't white. They're exactly like the people who are excusing the system and arguing against changing tools. Because, this was the generation they were raised in. And so maybe it's time then we start putting term limits or age limits on how long can you be the chief of medicine, chair of medicine, the program director of a residency program. Because as I look at all the people that are right now, I run up against most who are the people who are trying to get me to not radicalize their white residents. They're the same generation of people who are excusing why we have these things, right? Mm-hmm. They're the same people who say, but this is how I was raised, or we need to do the EFGR. So I thank you for holding this topic because, as again, part of my, primarily, I'm not a pediatrician. I am a family nurse practitioner, but so often in the realm of birth and how things happen, you come, you attend a birth, or I mentor a resident or medical students or whomever the learner is through a birth. We do some, we hand off a baby and then we leave. But we often forget about the baby, right? Because it's not our patient once it's out of the mother's womb. I've done my job. But as someone who is a community-based midwife who walks with my patients through their pregnancies, through their birth, and beyond, I've seen it happen and never sort of thought about it, but in the last few months, increasingly have been having issues with patients whose babies are being taken from them, or who are having interventions that are disrupting their breastfeeding, their bonding, up to and including having babies placed in the NICU over a tool that theoretically is supposed to be designed, to save lives and Black mothers. But at the same time, I have several patients who are from Indonesia or Pakistan who were having babies that were being sent home and only to come back or to have to take them to another hospital where they had jaundice and their babies had been sent home because it's, quote, common knowledge that South Asian babies have higher bilirubins and don't need to be treated. So as I was thinking about that and having to fight this several times in, a short period of time, I was really surprised to see that none of the pediatric providers in that institution, none of the nurses seemed to think that there must be something wrong when 90% of the babies that you're treating for jaundice are Black. Almost none of the babies that you're treating for jaundice are South Asian or Latinx. And, yet we're having a high rate of readmissions in one, and others are driving, what I would almost say is a free-for-all, a financial free-for-all for our NICU.
Yeah.
And then I wish Sister Lana could have been with us today, because I would love for her to be able to think about, when we think about the financial costs of how, in the United States today, 17% of babies that are term babies are admitted to the NICU. Whether it's for 8 hours or 48 hours and things like that. And that even in an institution with high rates of Medicaid, apparently NICU reimbursement is quite lucrative. And because NICUs often have to be staffed with the nurses in anticipation of admissions, they don't like having a low census in NICUs, which I thought was really interesting. And so when I was thinking this and actually having to have conversations of explaining that there's data that says that this bilirubin tool is not equal. I started thinking first of it, was it just about racism? Was it just about ignorance? Or now I'm left thinking, is this really about money? And how the medical industry, and especially in academic institutions like the ones that you and I work in, that since as long as Medicare and Medicaid has been funding graduate medical education, how much of medical education in the United States is built on the backs of the poor, which are disproportionately Black, and the disabled. And so not only are we talking about medical racism, we're really talking almost, I hate to use the word, but one of the words that popped to my head is that this is practically human trafficking, when we're pushing patients into a setting where they don't need to be, and doing it for financial gain, but also the impact that it has when we realize that I spend a lot of time talking about maternal mortality, but even more serious from the most common reason that babies are being admitted to NICUs are related to prematurity and jaundice and things like that. But how much harm are we doing when we're taking a baby that was low birth weight, we're admitting it to the NICU, we're putting it under lights, leaving it under lights, and we're not letting the mother be skin to skin with them or breastfeed them. So this is what really, the first thing that annoyed me was just, oh, this tool. But then it got into, wow, this is really deeper than just a tool that doesn't work right.
Yeah. And I thank you. I mean, you said already a whole mouthful just right there. I mean, you just broke down so much right there. And I want to go back, and we're going to do some level setting because we have a varied audience here, and we don't assume everyone here has a medical background. And so we're going to talk about what is jaundice, what is this tool, how does it look like. I'm going to post some things up for you to review in a bit as we're having the conversation. But I want to go back to the scandal, so-called scandal. For us, it's like just another Tuesday with I think it's Lady Hesse or whatever her name is, Prince William's godmother, and that comment. And I can read for you a transcript if I can find it here, just a brief transcript of what happened, just in case folks are like, um, did not catch what happened. If I can find it again, I kind of like pulled it up and then missed it. But yes, there was basically what happened was that a woman by name of Ngozi Fulani, who is a black woman, a black British woman, and does excellent work and activism work in England, the UK, was at a session, was at an event with this lady Hesse person, and proceeded to receive what people call microaggressions, and I just call casual, not I, but many of us call just everyday racism, right? Casual racism of othering, and sort of the reinforcement. Sister Michelle, you might need to mute. You might need to mute.
So
No, you're fine. And which is just the everyday racism of like being black in the world, right? And so this lady Hesse doing the thing where you put people in their place. You want to establish the order of things where you're at, to establish where you are in the pecking order, which is at the top, and then kind of place people where they need to be. And to me, as I was reading, and y'all, I might not be able to find it like I was trying to, but as I was reading the transcript, I was just like, it was the insistence for me, like the intentional just not wanting to catch a hint for me, while Ngozi was trying to avoid responding to the answer and kind of like dropping mad hints that we will not be having this conversation. This character was not letting go. She was truly like a dog with a bone, with a racist bone, right? A racist dog with a racist bone, and was not trying to let go of this bone. She wanted to know where this woman was from. She wanted to be clear as to like, okay, no, how racist can I be with you, right? Like, I mean, really, because what is the point? And despite Ngozi's very classy, very professional, avoidances of the conversation, she wasn't trying to hear it. So at this point, I can't lift up the I'll be able to pull it up later. I don't know why my phone do me like this sometimes, but essentially it was, she kept insisting, where are you from? Because he kept saying from the UK and from, and she got to the point where she was like, well, I see we're gonna have a problem, and kudos to the palace for firing her, because she's also a lady in waiting to the queen, this lady Hesse person. So kudos to them. They apparently removed her. I don't know the extent to which they produce this repercussion, because you know how they play tricks with us sometimes. They'll be like, yeah, we fired the CEO, but you also gave them like $50 billion in I don't what's the word called, but you know what I'm trying to say, in stock options or whatever. There is sort of a there's a word I'm looking for. Hopefully, if somebody knows the word, you could go ahead and DM me. But basically, the thing they give them when they're having them to go. All right. So you fire them, but also, they get to keep their memberships here. They get $50 billion. They get land. They get all kinds of stuff to be like, sorry, we have to do this because we don't want the blacks to be all over us and all up on our ass. But here's all these things to kind of placate you so that you don't give us any problems, or because we really don't think something wrong happened. But these motherfuckers are loud and get on our nerves. So right, like that kind of energy. So yes, they said that they removed, but we don't know. She may have gotten to keep her wealth and her, and her land and her title and all those things. So at the end of the day, what is the accountability, right? To what degree these things are performative, and to what degree do they actually inflict pain so that people don't do shit again, right? It remains to be seen. But there was an expression of, there was something was done. Okay, again, to what degree is impactful if the jury's out, but something, at least the palace responded by saying, yeah, we don't tolerate racism, and the rest of us like, hashtag Meghan Markle and everybody else. And then also, there was that. So I appreciate you bringing and tying. I love when we do that in this space, where we tie what we're talking about again to real life, just ongoing, just life, and really the conversation around that. These, what we talk about here around this roundtable, is expressive of, it mirrors in bi-directionally, right? The white supremacism that we are surrounded by, the anti-blackness that we're surrounded by in all kinds of spaces. And I think that's again why we're moving towards anti-racism in action roundtable, to name that it's not just medicine, but we have to think about these things intersectionally. Medicine does present it has a plays a unique and very powerful role. Healthcare, academia, absolutely. At the same time, it also reflects and embodies and is a container for these same forces all around us. We have to have an intersectional lens to this conversation, which is why, Sister Michelle, when you were saying that, is this a racism issue? Is this a capitalist issue, or, money making issue? Is this an ableist issue? What is this? It is all of them. It is all of them together, intersectionally working together. It's not an either or. It is not a zero sum. It is all of it together. It's always being all of this together. Always. We talk about racial capitalism in this space, and you're right. Sister Lana is an expert in this. She wasn't able to be here today. She was engaged in family affairs. But that is absolutely a beautiful gift she has in really weaving these things together to showcase how they're all intersectional. It's all work. It's always been that way, Sister Michelle. So you're absolutely right, with that. And I want to segue into really breaking things down, but through the piece you brought up, where the response to these individuals that introduce violence into your timeline, right? Which often happens, unfortunately, in our spaces. Where they're justifying it by, oh, she's 80. Okay. Honey, we know 80-year-olds that are learning new skills. We know 80-year-olds that are whizzes on the computer. We know 80-year-olds that, like, my mother isn't 80 yet, but this woman is better on like devices, on like the phone, than I am. She be doing all kinds of filters, all kinds of. I'm like, are you an IG model or what? Like, she is out of control on these phones. My mom, right? My dad we asked me, so what's going on with Beyonce today? I was like, first of all, how do you even know how to pronounce her name? Like, why do you know these things? They try to keep up with what's going on, right? Because they understand that's what they're supposed to do if you're going to be alive in the world. Why don't you know what's going on around you? Like, why would you know what is happening? My dad would be like, yeah, asking me about the latest. Like, they are more up to date than I am. While he's asking me the question, I'm Googling it so that I have an opinion to like share with them. But they already know before I do. We all have grandparents, some of us great grandparents, aunties, uncles, old as all get out, Asians, okay, out here learning all kinds of like new skills. Some of our folks are going back to school. They are trying to like stay on the up and up. It is never an excuse that somebody is too old. I refuse that. There are too many examples of folks, all kinds of elders that are just like doing the most to like stay on top of things and even freedom dream ahead. So I'm not necessarily a fan of automatic term limits or age limit. And well, term limits is one thing that's different, but age limits necessarily. I'm not like it, that's not automatic for me. I'm more so around what are the criteria we're looking for, and regardless of age, do you meet them? Because there's some young bastards out there. This dumbass guy, whatever his name, Fuentes, the like known hater, horrible person, the one that was that, in terms of other news that was going on, Trump, number 45, I try not to say his name, number 45 had dinner with Kanye and this other Fuentes guy. This Fuentes guy is 25 years old. And he is worse than some of the oldest. I think David Duke is like, damn. Even David Duke, Grand Wizard, KKK is like, God damn. Even I, right? This Fuentes guy is young. A lot of the people that are out here doing damage, these are young people that have inherited all kinds of rubbishness, that they're out here perpetuating violence of all kinds. These are young folks. So I'm just saying, like, just from my stand, I'm always happy to get into a conversation. But I was really thinking of what you're saying, Sister Michelle, and you bring up some powerful points. But I also know elders that are doing great things. So in my opinion, it's a choice. When you have an 80-year-old lady in waiting touching a Black woman's hair and body, insisting that she bow to her need to identify, label, and place her, and not live, do what she's supposed to do. I can also see a 25-year-old idiot doing the same thing, because racism is racism, anti-Blackness is anti-Blackness, and white supremacism is white supremacism. I doesn't give a shit about how old they are or how whatever they are. It's a choice. It is always a choice. And folks be making the choice that works for them, period. And when you are privileged, or you are placed in a privileged position, totally unearned, as always, you get to choose what you want to do. I want to do what I want to do. I'm going to do it because I can, and I will get away with it, right? And so this is a great sort of breakdown for what when we experience the resistance you're talking about institutionally to change, right? It's comfortable and we have the power. Why should we change until we make it too painful or too costly, right? Or more costly or more painful than the status quo? Long as they're comfortable and it's convenient, and the status quo will continue, they will be performative. Yeah, we get it. All lives matter, blah, 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 and all that business. Yeah, right? But immediately it starts to hurt, right? From a money standpoint, from a comfortability standpoint, from a life standpoint, from a limb standpoint, from a property standpoint, it's always going to be like, whatever. We're going to do what we're going to do, the end, because that's how power works. So we're not surprised. We're not surprised at all when we experience the same energy in our educational spaces. But to your point, that's why we have round spaces like this round table, so that many of us that are educators, that are leaders in various spaces, we can take this information to our spaces of leadership and education and teaching and clinical pieces and activism and advocacy and learning and church and mosque and temple, whatever, our families, the kitchen table, to begin like, did you know, and how do we do differently? How do we do better? So I just want, amen. And I think that that's where it's at. And that goes from grandma and great grandma all the way to little baby still in the womb. Like the whole, every one of us, we all have to learn and do better. And so speaking of that, so thank you. I'm really glad. I love the way you sort of like linked all these things. I think that was just beautiful. And really helps me again. Yeah, this is why we do, what we do, and we can push back against people talking about generation or people are old. That's not true. People are old, and part of being old is this. As someone getting older myself, is you get really comfortable with just how you are. But the part of living life to the fullest is to never get that way. It's easy and tempting, but how do we keep making ourselves a little bit uncomfortable so we can be better in the world we live in? You have to adapt The people that don't adapt die. You die and you die off, period. But when you are able to adapt, and adaptability is inherent in adaptability is a bit of uncomfort, but it's a sweet discomfort. It's like a very sweet discomfort because you're growing, you're better, you're learning more, and you can be more useful to more people. You can be more, you're relevant to more people. You can listen and understand and be of use and of service. So, and do more because you get it, as opposed to making the choice. And it's always a choice, right? To just like not be decrepit and be a nuisance and a burden, right? And I believe that, that is a choice for folks, despite regardless of age. And I want to just lift that up. And so, speaking of that, let's talk about just, speaking of teaching and education, Sister Michelle, help us to understand what is jaundice and why is, another term folks might hear or see is hyperbilirubinemia, which is a tongue twister medical term that means high bilirubin. And when you have high bilirubin, you look yellow. and that yellow is called jaundice. But help us to understand, like, why do babies get jaundice? Why is it a bad thing? And why do we need a tool to detect it? And then we'll break down the tool.
Yeah, so jaundice, as you just mentioned, is a medical condition where, in the case of newborns, but even in adults, but where the pigment bilirubin, which is part of the red blood cells, as they're being broken down, become build up in excessive levels or in high levels. And if left to its own devices, can cause serious, devastating health complications to newborns. When babies are in the womb, they have a different type of kind of red blood cell and hemoglobin that at birth your body starts breaking them down. And so when they pee and poop and as they start eliminating as they're born, they will remove it. But there are some times when you get excessive levels and you're not able to get rid of them as fast as they're being broken down. And so that excess of bilirubin, that is what causes jaundice, which, some of us who grew up in the South, our grandparents would have called us sallow, peaked. Yes, babies may appear yellow around the eyes, mouth, and even under the skin. But those excessive bilirubin can build up in tissue and can create both neurological problems, problem with the liver, and in the serious occasions when left untreated, it can cause death. It can come from some causes which are fairly benign, right? Just the fact that, as I said, after you're being born, your body is making new red blood cells and not quite getting rid of the others. There's one that causes one type called breastfeeding jaundice. So breastfed babies usually have higher levels of bilirubin than babies that are being bottle fed. And it can last for up to 3 months, but it's usually pretty benign. Mothers who wait and delay the baby's umbilical cord, or who practice what we call lotus birth in some communities and cultures will have higher levels. But, there are different types of jaundice, number one. Some of them are fairly harmless and babies get better. But if it's one of those types of jaundice where they could be being at risk for severe illness, it's a problem. So depending on your institution, but I would guess most places in the United States now, although I worked in the British Commonwealth and in the UK, most hospitals in the United States universally assess babies for jaundice at about 24 hours of life. Usually, and that's why a lot of times if you give birth in a hospital, you're not going home for at least 24 hours because they want to make sure your baby doesn't have a form of jaundice before they go home that could be harmful. And, there's two ways to do it. And the old-fashioned way was to draw blood from every baby. So those of you that have children who, and especially in the time that we've been doing this, you know when that phlebotomist came into the room, took your sweet baby from your arms and put them in the bassinet or on the warmer, and then poked your child with a needle, and that might have been the first time, except for being born, that you heard your baby scream in pain and fear. And then you send that blood to the lab. You wait a few hours before you get that level. And depending on that level, they decide whether or not your baby needs to be treated. Of course, back in the old days, a nurse, they give credit to a British nurse, but let's be honest, there were black grannies and Indian grannies all over the world who realized when your baby was looking sallow, you sat outside on the porch in the sun and let them get sun, and it got better. But UV light is the treatment for jaundice. I remember jaundice was just instructed to sit in the window a couple times a day. But anyway, so getting blood drawn is painful to babies, and that distresses families. Getting blood drawn and having it sent to the lab is costly, even if it's only a few pennies or a few dollars, because that means you're employing phlebotomists, you're employing lab techs, and you're running tests that require reagents. And so all of these things cost money. So as we've talked about some of these other tools we had, it's been many years now that someone decided, wouldn't it be great if we could develop tools that we could do a reading through the skin, where we'll just, put a little meter up against the baby's head, hold down a button, and it would give us a number that would tell us the baby's bilirubin level. And if it's obviously normal, and if it's well into the normal range, we figure those babies are fine, we let them go home. If the levels are very, very, very high, we assume that the level is very high and that the baby needs treatment. And many hospitals will call the lab and have them come and draw blood to kind of verify it, but they'll immediately take the baby and put it under the UV lights, or what we call the Billy lights. Some of you may have had a baby that was diagnosed with jaundice that had spend time in a light, but that means that your baby is, even before they have the result to prove it, rather than wait, they swoop in, take your baby from you, and put it in its little, baby sun, tanning bed, cover its eyes, and then proceed to start treating it for bilirubin. And then, that's how the bilitool works. It's meant to be screening, right? It's meant to pick out the ones that are obviously going to be fine and the ones that are obviously in danger by a reading through the skin. And over the years, institutions, and especially institutions in areas that have a large population that they serve, that had a large population of color, especially African American, specifically, or other melanated people of color, there seemed to be something interesting as they were switching to this bilitool, which is, it seemed that a lot more Black babies than white babies were being diagnosed with jaundice. More dark-skinned Latinx babies, more South Asian babies. And so someone decided to start doing some tests. And two of the articles, and one of the articles that was done, and even as early as 10 years ago, which were done by Team Africa, because primary authors and researchers were Nigerian or of Nigerian descent, both in the United States and in the UK, observed that yes, overall, these tools worked pretty well, but it does seem that dark-skinned babies get higher readings. And so what that means is more dark-skinned babies are being separated from their mothers and being treated for jaundice, and it may be hours before someone just realizes that the lab test comes back and says, oh, it turns out that your baby's normal, because the discrepancies could be as high as 50%. And so that, that's sort of where I came into it, because, being a midwife who works in a predominantly Black city, who the majority of my patients are from the African diaspora, I'm often being called frantically by community health workers or doulas or my mothers themselves while they're in the hospital, that just as they were planning to go home, because this is their second or third baby, they have a great village around them, and they're ready to leave, their babies were being taken from them, because the bilitool, all they tell me is that, they said it says that the baby's, bilirubin is 18 or whatever number, and that's severely high. So that's how I started doing some research and started thinking, I think it's interesting that I don't see that many white babies that are under the lights. But I get a lot, at least once a week, one of my patients are being put under the lights. And so that's when I started doing research and found those articles, including the ones I shared with you, that said, yes, there are absolutely discrepancies, and that depending on which tool they're using, which brand they're using, the discrepancies can be worse than others. And for the sake of that article, and for the institution where I work, and for many institutions, because it's one of the most popular, the device that was called, Billy Check, is the one that has the greatest discrepancies. And that was one of the most common ones that institutions use. So whether it's because it's a popular manufacturer or a great price, if your baby's, if you're a peds resident, or if you're a mother, or if you're just concerned at all about, why some babies are being separated from their mothers, and having breastfeeding disrupted, having bonding disrupted, being sent to a NICU maybe because you've given birth in a hospital where there's no longer a nursery. So the only place where babies get higher levels of care is in the NICU, which is probably a minimum of about $5,000 a day. Having a tool where in my hospital, 60%, like I said, 60% of the babies born in my hospital are Black. I guess at Henry Ford in Detroit, maybe that number is more like 80 or 90%. So what does it mean for institutions that are serving Black mothers and babies, or Native American mothers and babies that are maybe darker skinned than others? What does it mean for an institution to decide to use a tool that has been proven to be inaccurate, and to separate a mother and baby or an entire family to drive up healthcare costs because it's calibrated for only one quote unquote race.
And Sister Michelle, I want to pause you there because you really downloaded a lot right there. And that's a great question. I hope that we all sit with that and would love to hear as we open soon to the audience for what does this mean, right? In this particular way. And I want to just go back and just sort of summarize your amazing points. Uh, everybody here on the stage. That's why I call y'all goddesses and divine folk, because you can literally sit and deliver a sermon on the mount. Okay, in a minute. And Sister Michelle may be lying down recovering from illness and still be able to like break down the whole encyclopedia Africana, okay, in 2 minutes. But first of all, she defined hyperbilirubinemia or jaundice. Same thing. Okay, jaundice is that yellow skin tone because the pigment that is released by the blood cells, but that's normal. That's normal. It's and it's usually metabolized by the liver, and then you eliminate it with pee and in your pee and poo, and it gives the skin a yellow sheen. So that's where that jaundice, and there's a whole history to that we can visit another time. And so the problem here is normally it should be released, and you eliminate it in your pee and poo, and life goes on. But for some reason, sometimes, for many reasons, that doesn't happen. And when it accumulates in babies, when the amount increases in babies, it can start to sort of be deposited in various organs, including the brain, which results in a condition known as kernicterus. And that it causes severe damage. Okay, severe damage. So we don't, when we usually are treating for high bilirubin levels or jaundice, it is to prevent this complication of kernicterus, particularly because of the brain damage and subsequent complications that can occur as a result. And so how do we treat? That's what Dr. Michelle was saying. We put them on lights. It's amazing, right? How we call phototherapy, put them on under ultraviolet light, UV light, and that helps to break down these pigment, the bilirubin, and help it be better absorbed and eliminated, through the pee and the poo. So it is so that's just like kind of to give that baseline. So as you can imagine, to prevent it's rare, but it is so devastating, this consequence. It is important that we're able to detect right, when the baby has high bilirubin. You can't always go by skin for a variety of reasons. So it's important to detect. And so back in the day, it was a blood draw, but technology and science, a tool was devised, right? But as we say, and Sister Lana teaches us all the time, this is the issue with technology or all kinds of quote unquote artificial intelligence. And we learned from Sister Lana that the so-called intelligence is neither artificial nor intelligence, but from technology is that when it just reproduces the biases and the sort of dynamics of oppression and suppression and repression and okay, and violence inside of the makers and the manufacturers of the technology. It just reproduces when those same assumptions are built into the design of these tools. It reproduces the same impact in terms of the disparities that it then results in at the other end. And so this thought that you test this tool on white skin or whiter skin, right? And ignore the skin color that actually predominates the earth, right? And you design a tool that is going to be dependent on melanin and melanin amount. But you don't think about that because the people you test it on have less pigments, have less melanin. So you don't think that, wait a minute, majority of folks have melanin, and this is gonna, impact the way this technology is gonna work to adequately and correctly determine the bilirubin content in the system that is going to then have impact on treatment. And so that's why when we talk about how everybody needs to be justice oriented, equity oriented, you got to think inclusively from a justice and equitable standpoint, that this policy, this program, this product, this plan, how does it impact all the folks that I am, that it will affect? And is it in any way going to replicate, reproduce, or produce the same systems, unjust systems that exist or pre-exist in terms of obstructing my good intentions by, creating this product, plan, policy, program, project, process, etc., practice, etc., right? So all those P's, in what ways will they inequitably impact the people that will use this, or that will be affected by this? That's what it means to disrupt whiteness, right? And what it means to, like, just to understand that, oh, first of all, this is the world in which we live in, this is the environment, and I am a potential channel or medium or vessel through which these dynamics can play out in the things that I'm doing, if it's meant for people, because people are not just one group or entity. You're taking care of a diverse group of folks, and if you're going to design a technology that is dependent on skin pigment or melanation, then honey, how does it impact the people that have higher melanin, which, by the way, are actually the majority of folk in the world from a global standpoint? And then from a lot of our healthcare centers and universities that are intentionally, by the way, by design, built in quote unquote urban areas, and areas that have the quote unquote teaching material to teach these doctors, nurses, pharmacists, etc. It's not by, and we're going to have another roundtable on this, that is not by accident that certain hospitals, medical schools, universities, etc., are located where they are located in this country in terms of medicine or healthcare professional training. It is tied to access to the bodies that were used to teach and establish the technology and learnings and etc. for the healthcare professionals today. And those were Black and brown bodies. So what does it mean to, and this brings us to what Dr. Michelle is breaking down. What does it now then mean for a whole, like the largest, and she spent time talking about the significance of where she works, and the catchment area, the number of people they're taking care of. So now multiply that across the nation, across 50 states and multiple cities and towns, right? And the people you're taking care of. I see my namesake is in the building, Sister Ijeoma Isiadin. So welcome. Long time. That's a wonderful sister doing great things, powerful things in cardiology. And so so what does it mean when you multiply the impact of of institutional choices, right, across the country, across so many the 50 states and so many cities? And here's the global piece, and Sister Michelle is great at this too, right? Understand, as we've said and established in this space, white supremacism and anti-Blackness is one of the greatest exports, American exports, throughout the globe. It's done in so many ways, certainly the textbooks, certainly in the teaching, beliefs and philosophies that are then, transported when people go on quote unquote mission, whatever that is. And we unpack that. We don't use that term anymore, but on these quote unquote mission experiences where they're going to go teach in, I'm going to Haiti to teach. I'm going here to teach what? Going back again to what Dr. Michelle was talking about, when the education, y'all here emphasizing race as biology and race as, I have read, and I would say this, Sister Michelle, even when I read the article that you shared by the Nigerian doctors, there was still some, the fact that they still sort of termed African babies as a racial category was problematic. And of course, they didn't mean anything about it, except that is what they are taught. Africans are not a quote unquote race. And this is not a question of, like, quote unquote, again, race, but a question of your melanation content. Because like you beautifully did, you said, listen, brown skinned South Asian babies who are darker than you and I, by the way, right? Some of them, right, can be as darker than you and I, are also going to be placed at risk, but they're a different nationality and ethnicity. So it's not necessarily like quote unquote race again, an invention of white supremacism. But it's like, where the hell are you from? Like, what's your geographical background? What is your environmental exposure? What is the amount of melanin content? And all these are the things, not like quote unquote feeding using these labels, right? Because we know black people that are lighter than Robinette Biden, right? And they identify as black. They're like, I'm black, and this is just how I show up in the world, right? Right? We know a number of them. We're all over the place, right? Especially go down south, all our red bones and all of that, right? And then we know, of course, dark skinned folks are like, yeah, no, or brown skinned folks. I'm trying to get away from this whole dark light nonsense, but brown skinned folks who are deeply brown, who are like, yeah, so I'm from Bangladesh, I'm from Pakistan, I'm from all these places in the world, who, but they don't necessarily say, oh, quote, quote, black, or feed into that racial categorization. So so when we start using these things, we're beginning to conflate a number of things when it just really, let's talk about the thing. What is the thing that is affected necessarily? And it's like, yeah, the amount of pigment you got, the melanation you got, because that is how the light of the tool works to determine the amount of bilirubin, right? To that then puts you at risk for these negative outcomes. And the fact of the matter is that you are therefore, and this is the power of that approach, you then understand how racism, again, and anti-blackness specifically, hurts everybody. And I love one thing that you said earlier, Sister Michelle. You said, not only my black babies are being separated, and now we're going to go deeper into it. Like, what are the costs of this, of, using a tool that, doesn't work well in browner skin folks and for brown skin babies, right? And what is that impact? You talk about family separation, which has a whole entire history there when it comes to black families, right? And although and numerous other pieces, increased NICU costs, the and the cost to the family, the bill, the medical debts, which I believe is number one or number two cost. It's number two, I believe. I think credit card is number two. Number one, girl, if y'all know, go ahead and DM me. Y'all, this is a community sport, and y'all know things I don't, and vice versa. But y'all know what the rank of the cost of debt, at least in this country, is. I know credit card and medical bills is like they play with each other. I feel like medical debt is number one and credit card number two, and then the rest of them. But y'all go ahead and correct me. But regardless, it's a huge source of debt to a people that have already been systemically and systematically deprived of wealth. And so how do you again you sort of encourage and reproduce and exacerbate poverty in that group of folks that you've already systemically and systematically deprived and excluded from opportunities for gaining wealth, right? Because you have wrongly, inappropriately, incorrectly, diagnosed something that necessarily did not apply, right? And you've done it through this tool that in your mind is sort of equal as opposed to equitable. It's another great example for the difference between equality and equity, right? And so thinking through these pieces, I think, becomes critical, in this conversation, in how we again through the lens of quote unquote good intentions only exacerbate harm in particularly anti-black with folks through a lens of anti-blackness. So I want to talk more about the impact piece and really spelled it out. You talked about going back again, Sister Michelle, the separation, family separation, which is very, very fraught in this country as a tool that has negatively impacted black families in the very many ways, whether it's CPS, through the justice system, physical, literal ripping families apart during slavery, Jim Crow, and the list goes on. And how this is also another sort of agent of that. To talk about the health, and then of course there's multiple then implications: mental, physical, economic health that comes out of that. I love that you talked about breastfeeding and how that disrupts the bond and the breastfeeding pieces of both, which are critical for mom's health and baby's health and the family health as a whole because of mom and baby. All right. Talking about, again, the financial costs, we talked about that. Talking about the increased exposure, because now you take a baby who could, at the end of the day, end up being totally healthy and well, and put them in the NICU with other babies with legit like health conditions, and expose them needlessly to illness and other pathogen, right? And we talk about the trauma. That's again the trauma, the separation as a trauma that then has impact, longitudinal impact, impact for as they grow up and as adults that show up. And I believe there was a study that was done on this, babies that are in the NICU, babies that, it's funny, they don't look at the reason they're in the NICU, but that the very fact that you're in the NICU, that then predisposes for long-term effects on health and wealth. So what does it mean when you take otherwise healthy babies and put them, increase their risk for not just issues now acutely, but issues later? And it's based on, a systematic and systemic, approach to baby health in terms of jaundice management, that doesn't take into account that babies come in this world with all shades of melanin, or folks that are born in different parts of the world, that their levels are different because of the environment that they're born into. And so I really want to talk about the impact, and then when it's done on such a level as like in your institution and many of our institutions, again, that are by design located in areas that are majority Black and brown, as you were asking that question, and I would just invite you to go deeper, what this can mean to help folks to begin to think through the impact as we segue to audience. The audience, you are very welcome to start requesting to speak, and ask your questions, your comments. If there's something that wasn't clear, if there's something you want to add, go ahead and put in your request as we round up here. Go ahead, Sister Michelle.
Yeah, and again, at the end of the day, the bilitool, Billy Check, pick a brand, is just a racist tool, right? Because at the end of the day, bilirubin is pigment, and so is melanin. Mm-hmm. So they built this tool that reads all pigment as pigment, and pigment is therefore bad. So we are already starting out with the baseline of course, Blackness is a disease. But at Ubuntu Black Family Health, we focus on, treating pregnancy as normal. We focus on dismantling the structural societal racism that has led to the majority of Black mothers never initiating breastfeeding or not breastfeeding long. And we start with the fact that we assume all of our mothers will breastfeed. And the reason why that's important to us is because in the state of Delaware, Black babies are 3 times more likely to die in the first year of life than their white counterparts. In the city of Wilmington, they are 7 times more likely. And we know that one of the most effective tool to make sure that babies are well, especially when we think about from respiratory infections, pneumonia, and diarrhea, which are really true causes of morbidity and mortality in babies under 1, not only in the United States but worldwide, is early and exclusive breastfeeding.
Breastfeeding, right.
There's also the fact that, we know that our mothers will be better nourished if we focus on nutrition. And yes, there are things like WIC. And yes, WIC will provide you formula, but WIC will not provide you enough formula to be able to feed your baby for a month. So if you don't actually have the financial wherewithal to provide 30 days worth of formula when you're only given about 18 days worth in your allotment, you may be thinning out your supply. You may be mixed breastfeeding. You may be, feeding your baby other cow's milk products or some other soy milk product or whatever that may not be intended for newborns. So early exclusive breastfeeding is big for us. And so the reason I became aware of this was two things. As a midwife, I am one of the people who does delayed cord clamping for at least 5 minutes at the hospital. And the pediatricians hate that, by the way. The neonatologists hate that. I hope somebody can tell me why. So even though we know that the jaundice that those babies were having the next day was what we would call physiologic jaundice, my babies were being snatched away from their mothers.
And Sister Michelle, what is physiologic jaundice?
So, physiologic jaundice is a jaundice that, we know the cause of it is related to the normal breakdown of those fetal blood cells that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. We know that it will dissipate as soon as mother's milk supply comes in, or if she's formula feeding as baby pees and poops, that it doesn't lead to that kernicterus, that severe form you were talking about.
Right.
So you're going to have a yellow baby and it's going to be fine, and it'll go away over time, but it doesn't need to be treated. However, if somebody uses that bilitool again, it will say that your baby is jaundiced. So first I, as a clinician, was doing delayed cord clamping, which was leading to a slightly higher rate of jaundice. And then our mothers, who are well trained, that they are going to exclusively breastfeed their babies, when their babies were coming back with these high levels of tools, or already, high levels of bilirubin on the billy check, were already programmed because they have been taught by us in our pregnancy classes to basically politely tell the nurse or the pediatric resident or the PA who's coming in to talk to them, like, are you aware of the fact that that tool is not accurate in measuring bilirubin on melanated babies? And so I'm going to politely decline for my baby to be put under the UV lights.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, racism is interpersonal. So we often see that our parents might say very articulately, the way I just told you, no, thank you. But they're talking to a physician or a clinician or a nurse who thinks they're stupid. Mm-hmm. And so who is this Black mother to tell me that she is not going to let me treat this baby the way I want to be treated?
And Sister Michelle, I want to come in here and just lift that up. That's why when again, we focus on the systems. I'm fine with patient advocacy and equipping and inspiring. I don't believe we empower people. I think people have power already. I ain't giving nobody, but right. So, but that we can encourage it, right? We can encourage it and like identify your power and blossom in it. But girl, boy, friend, sibling, love, cousin, you got the power, right? So, so we can inspire people to speak, like you said. I have a huge asterisk in all those conversations because I also am on the other side. I know the attitude when we speak up for ourselves, right? I know what gets in the documentation. I know what is what my residents, some of my residents, I have amazing, wonderful residents and trainees and medical students. I also have folks that they're still in the beginning phases of their anti-racism, anti-oppression journey, shall I say, and the words and the language that's patient refused, patient non-compliant, patient is belligerent, patient doesn't make sense, patient is crazy, right? Because the patient articulated, like you said, in the way that he said, because again, that intrinsic internalized, racism and sexism, there is of course an intersectionality, a misogyny, because it's Black, oftentimes women spoke up, and the Black men that do speak up and police themselves because they don't want to be externally policed in the hospital while they're sick, right. By the way, which is like ridiculous to me, but that's what they have to do to be safe in healthcare settings. A lot of my Black male patients have done this and spoken to me in private about this, which like breaks my heart every single time. But absolutely, I'm so glad that you said that, because one of the pieces, and again, y'all, you can request to speak. We'll be closing a bit. Is that we have to remember as we freedom dream what is better. And Ubuntu Family, Black Family Health Center is an example of a better model and a better way and a different way to do this. And one piece that, Sister Michelle is talking about now is the education and the equipping of our patients with the knowledge, while recognizing that they are doing that in sometimes violent settings. I mean, oh my God, the courage it takes. I'm a freaking physician. Okay, I'm a freaking scientist. I'm a freaking researcher and educator, right? And I still, as a patient, when I've been a patient in the healthcare system, it takes a lot for me to garner all of that, to speak up, even to advocate for myself. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And we underestimate it. We underestimate the power of institutional presence and the impact it has on our folks. And that's me in the place I work as a patient. How much more folks that may not have the language, may not have the wherewithal, they know something ain't right, they know they have but they don't know how to say it or what to say, or if they say what will happen, all of those things. So I just want that really touched me, Sister Michelle, what you're talking about around the patient advocacy part, and this acknowledgement that it doesn't mean don't speak up. Please continue to speak up. Please continue to demand and insist on your patient rights. Absolutely. And we also acknowledge that it has to go in parallel with systemic change and institutional change, so that we reduce the need for individuals to necessarily need to, advocate for yourself or place yourself in what could then potentially be dangerous, because then there's a labeling that happens. And if you don't have physicians and clinicians that are anti-racist and anti-oppression and anti-colonialist, anti-colonial, you get, there's a branding and then an exacerbation of poor health care. I also want to name that all my kids, all three of my baby girls, I have 8, 6, and 4 now, had physiologic jaundice, and I exclusively breastfed all three of them, and that's how we dealt with it. Sunlight and mommy's boobs, and that's how we did that. So I just want to also say, from a personal standpoint, engage with this, and it's scary. And I remember calling in my resident to come check the baby using a I don't know what brand it was, but it was a bilitool, right? Bilitool, I keep calling it bilitool, but it was the bilirubin, the photo sensor. That she used it too, and it was higher. But we just, I just nursed and sunlight. So, and we also want to name that, there are kids that are the babies that are at higher risk, real risk. So when I say, hey, every time the baby said has jaundice, say no, but there is a nuance and a subtlety there. When your baby is melanated, okay, we might need to do a blood test. While again, part of freedom dreaming, coming up with what are the better tools that don't necessarily rely on sensory approaches that will be biased or discriminate against people who are highly melanated. We need to develop those. But in the meantime, what are the things we can do to ensure that we're having an equitable, and we're providing our melanated babies an equal opportunity to be properly diagnosed? And those are the questions, and the approaches that we need, so that and at the same time, that we are not causing other babies to be put at harm's way that actually need treatment but are sent home, like you said, in terms of the impact, because of a racist nomogram that actually labels Blackness again as a risk factor, right? And then other groups as like a non-risk factor. And those babies are dying from, over undiagnosis and misdiagnosis, and their parents and families being placed at, as you said, extra distress and harm, because they're sent home, not do well, and need to show up back up in the ER. Again, a disruption of their bonding and development as well, right? While our babies are being placed at harm in a different way. So again, anti-Blackness affects everybody. Nobody benefits from a system built on this. So anyway, you just inspired me to really speak to that, Sister Michelle. But you were saying, just to kind of take you back to where you were.
You did.
Yeah.
It's just like how this, when we think about, we talk about those different levels of racism.
Yeah.
We talk about institutional, we talk about interpersonal, we talk about internalized, and we talk about, systemic. And you could see it in the way this was working, and the way it often works. So, with our mothers, they're trained, they're educated, and they will politely decline to have their babies go under lights. They'll consent to a blood draw, and but in the meantime they say they're waiting, and they're immediately bumped up against with a clinician who says, well, this is our policy.
Yes. Oh Lord, no. The weaponization of policy. Woo.
Yes. And then the next thing that comes, the resident leaves, and now the attending or the nurse manager,
it's escalated, right?
Somebody in authority is still arguing with them, saying, your baby needs to go under the lights now. And then again, they're saying, I'm not saying no. I'm saying not now.
Right.
I'm saying I'll wait for my baby's blood to be drawn. I am in the meantime nursing. My baby is crying, alert. My baby's fine. So until you can document to me with a tool that's accurate, i.e. a lab, then we're not good. Then comes somebody who says, well, that could take hours because phlebotomy won't be here for 2 hours, and the result won't come. And, comes the threat of calling social work.
Right,
CPS,
right. Oh, my God.
Place your child under an order. And, this I have seen in the time that it has taken for me to come from my office to get to the hospital, where they have already called CPS and said this person isn't cooperating, and without any question, because an attending at the major hospital in the city and in the state says that I want permission to separate this mother and baby, a magistrate says fine. And then
I want to just really lift this. Oh my God, you are giving. I'm sorry, I'm having like PTSD from.
And I have literally, in the worst case, there was a mother who actually, I would say, was very appropriate.
Yeah.
She wasn't screaming. She wasn't yelling. She had a reasonable reason to go home. She had a vaginal delivery. She had other children at home. And, being a single mother, she was actually paying someone to stay at her home during the time that she was hospitalized, and to go back home. So she kept insisting. And then eventually she said, I'm leaving. I will be happy to come back when you call me back with the lab, but I'm leaving. So they, of course, did give her the discharge papers, let her sign out, and then they called DFS. And do you know that DFS came to that woman's home and then forcefully took her and her child to another hospital, who then, and only to find out that the bilirubin was right. But that woman to this day has a DFS file. And so what's going to happen with the next child or the next child? Because she was, labeled as being problematic and uncooperative. And a physician exercised their power quite passive aggressively by sending her home and then having police come to her and take her there. But even look at it, and so, I'm very thankful that we educate our patients. And so we have a system in place, and now the hospital knows me. They see the name of Ubuntu. They're prepared for the fact that if this baby has a high bilirubin, we're doing a blood draw. Don't bother fighting. But what about those mothers who don't? So what about those mothers who, the minute a resident walks in and says, your baby's bilirubin's high, they're going under the lights, they immediately agree. And or worse, because the level's very high, the level's 20, we're taking your baby to the NICU. This hospital happens to have a policy that if your baby gets into the NICU, it automatically stays in the NICU for 48 hours, regardless. So how does that mother who's maybe never breastfed or who wants to breastfeed but can't and is separated from her baby, right? Because she's allowed to go up and down whatever she wants. But if she's had a C-section, she needs to come down and take her pain medicine. She needs to go back down to her room when she wants to eat. She needs to sleep in her room. So she's separated from most of the time that her baby is in the NICU. And trying to establish breastfeeding when we haven't had the opportunity. Most of the time, if you don't establish breastfeeding in the first 48 hours of your child's life, statistically, you never will.
Mm-hmm.
And human milk from the human milk bank in the hospital is very expensive, and it's not covered by insurance. So the idea that maybe mom can pump downstairs, and then later on when you go home you'll feed your baby your own milk, well, that's great. But if they've decided that they're going to start feeding your baby formula because your insurance company doesn't cover the human milk bank and da 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 da. Most of the time, those mothers who don't get the opportunity to breastfeed won't. And so it has a lifelong impact on that baby's life and its health going forward. Because the one thing that we know, one of the many early interventions we can do that will help a baby's health and immunity, not only for the first years of life, but for the rest of his life. When we think about the benefits of breastfeeding alone, increasing IQ, decreased rates of infection, decreased rates of asthma, thinking of all the benefits that we know we get from breastfeeding, and one decision by one person who has the institutional power to say, I'm separating you from your baby because of this tool, impacts literally the rest of this baby's life.
And Sister Michelle, I want like so much. I want to highlight a few things and segue into the freedom driven part. And I think Ubuntu Black Family Health Center, it really is a great model. And I want to really talk more about, okay, how, what, when we're in charge, what is different, right? How do we approach these things differently? Because even the solution around when you are a person, oh, if you're browner, to say, okay, and I love that. I'm not saying no, I'm saying not right now, and we need to wait. I'm not consenting to phototherapy right now. I'm consenting to a blood draw so as to confirm the diagnosis, and then that will, absolutely, let's do everything that we need to do to treat, because I understand how this technology works in folks with our degree of melanation, the end, right? But my heart then also goes out to, for the blood draw. Now our babies are going to be disproportionately exposed to the blood draw pieces, and so how do we freedom dream around what are the approaches that we need to develop that really nurtures all our babies and moms and families? What are the approaches? What are the practices? What are the technology? Whatever. And just, I want us to just kind of like freedom dream around that a bit. But I also want to just go back a little bit. Thank you so much for spelling out the way that system works, and how things get escalated, and then how the systems intersect, right? And another time we're going to talk about, again, the intersectionality of criminal justice and healthcare, and how both these systems speak to and feed each other. And that there is a pipeline into the criminal justice system from healthcare systems, right? And now, on two things that was coming up for me. That, yes, how then things, I've witnessed it, I've been part of it, it's a mess, right? All it takes is a Black patient, a brown patient, to be like, no thank you, and give their reason, and just the wrong person to like not care, not understand, not hear it. Or but more so, again, we talk about more systems approach, not just that person, but their training, the educational system they were exposed to, that taught them this is how things are done and this is how it's not done, and when this happens it means that. And so they're simply playing out and demonstrating their training, right? And that is reinforced by the colleague to their right and to their left, and their front and in their back, and the ones that came before and the ones they're training, right? All of it goes back to how we started the conversation around the education and training piece. And so patient says, no thank you, this is my explanation, all they hear is no, then it goes into their electronic health record, which trains artificial intelligence and other type of technologies that say, okay, when you have a person of these criteria, they tend to be more belligerent, so already just have police on standby. Honey, I mean, when we talk about the impact and the ways that it goes way beyond our imagination, Sister Lana is great. I really spelling out how this feeds into so many pieces, right? And so the next time you show up, if you show up in the healthcare setting, your information is entered in. There's a flag there that says that, okay, just be aware this person is code gray or whatever, meaning just be clear that they tend to be non-compliant, and then it also has implication as it relates to insurance. So other insurance and other third party payer, and parties, credit, the credit report people, freaking mortgage and banking, whatever. Everything is coded and related, all this data. And then it's like, oh no, this is the kind of person that won't comply and refuses and declines and this and that and the other. So they don't get a credit, a viable credit score, or they don't get access to this opportunity of this resource. It is so very incredibly interlinked. That's why this work is so critical. It is such critical work to end these practices, to end these processes, to end the way the systems replicate themselves and perpetuate themselves in these ways. We have to name it, increase the awareness so that we can all go and have this inform our activism. This is an action roundtable. It is to go forth and integrate this into the work that we do to literally bring not just awareness is step one, but the action piece for change, because it is harming and killing. People are losing lives off of this, are being hurt, disabled. I'm also thinking of the trauma. Anyway, so that's why I'm always like, the word medical mistrust is a trigger word for me. Because what does that even mean? You think people just wake up in the morning not trusting medicine or the healthcare system? It is shit like this. And the ways that you just outlined, that escalation all the way to the courts, all the way to somebody coming to your house and forcing you to take your kid. I mean, at the levels to it, and the ways it impacts your other children and the rest of the family, and that stability, right? So when we talk about I really appreciate you, Sister Michelle, for really outlining not just like the health pieces, and all of this has to do with health and is intersected with health and related to and all that, but even beyond that, and you are breaking trust, you're destroying trust. And when with this mom, I'm thinking about, I'm just, when next will she bring her kid to the, to the healthcare, to the clinic or the hospital, she herself, when she walks in there and she has a trauma response. So I just we have to do better, and I would just love to, like, to freedom dream around what better can look like. And we've already sort of started hinting at that here and there. But I want to first of all shout out to Bruna Giovanni, who's here. I'll be calling you on to speak. Thank you for requesting to speak. When Sister Michelle responds, again, opening this up to everyone. Shout out to Sister Helena as always. Dr. Day, welcome. Shout out to Brother Bobby and everybody else that made time to be here. My wonderful Brother Brian, thank you. And my powerful sister, Dr. Noha Abuelata, who is just phenomenal, doing great work. And I really appreciate you being here, sis. And I hope that you do come on, because Sister Noha has been doing some great work with the pulse oximetry piece, which we made that connection in the beginning of this conversation. And she's been doing great work around that. And as some of you may know, the FDA finally released some weird, comment. I think they said, or Sister Noha can tell me what it actually does say, but something along that. Well, in some populations, it might not be reliable. There was something like that. But again, one thing this country really sucks at is acknowledgement and naming, taking responsibility, holding itself accountable in order to repair, bring about justice and healing. Really sucks at that. We saw an example, not to segue too much, but with the CDC director that was talking about the what is usually known as the Tuskegee study, but I call it by the full name, the United States Public Health Task Force Services, US PHS, and CDC study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. That's what it was. So we want to name who did it and what they did, which is basically to watch and see how syphilis shows up in the quote unquote Negro male when it's not treated, when there was treatment available. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm like having my chest is hurting just saying that right now, right? And that is just one of many examples, but it's important that we call these things what they are, right? But in any event, the CDC director tweeted something. I retweeted it for y'all that didn't follow, where it's like, oh, we want to thank the people, what are involved in this and again, she called it this Tuskegee study, and for the sacrifice, right? There was just this naming as if like people just like volunteered themselves for science. No, y'all committed a crime and violated human rights, and you still haven't paid for, I think it was 10 million, which is nothing, as you know, a drop in the bucket, that they reparated a few years ago. What is 10 million? That should be one family, but they did it for like every. You guys haven't done what you're supposed to do. Nobody sacrificed nothing. You committed a crime. So we don't do very well with owning up to responsibility, right? We find every defense and excuse. They're 80, but they're old. They're grandma. Grandma makes really good potato salad. So what if she's a little racist? So again, we have to do better. So shout out to Sister Noha, doing great work in many areas. One of which was, she was on the round table, and we're talking about postdocs in the same way that we're talking about the Billy tool, these photometers, and the problematic way, aka racist way, that they work to discriminate against browner skinned babies, and the impact that it has on the families on multiple levels to perpetuate disparities. Again, making anti-black assumptions that founded or that grounded the invention of the tool, and therefore its use in the ways that it is. So, but thank you again. If you want to make a comment, really love to hear your voice. You have a question, please come up. Really hoping to hear from Sister Noah, because she's amazing, as well as all of you that are amazing and great. Come up to make your comment as we're rounding up. But Sister Michelle, let's freedom dream a bit. A little bit is not a dream. You literally are doing many of these things in Ubuntu Black Family Health Center. I really love the way that you have trained your institution to recognize y'all and what you do. I love that. But like you said, what about the other people that don't go to Ubuntu? What about the other institutions all around the country? So what are some freedom dreaming we can do around how to build better? And then we will go to Bruna, Giovanni, and then anybody else who wants to speak before we close out.
Yeah, thank you again. And I'm looking forward to hearing answers. In another life, I wish I'd gone to MIT and, had the feelings, the thoughts, and the ways to fix this. But number one, I'm hoping and praying for Black scientists out there to come up with a better tool. Because like I said, it breaks my heart, it breaks my heart to think of a mother and father in a hospital listening to their newborn wail when they're being stuck for a bilirubin test. But, maybe there's a way. Is there a way for them to figure out the scale where we understand that, the Billy check is fine, but it only serves this people in the middle. So maybe we agree that, everybody who's on the extremes, we're gonna, we need to do more. But can we extend the range where we understand that if a melanated baby is doing well, it's nursing or formula feeding, it's peeing, it's pooping, it's bright, it's not jaundice, that we are going to talk to mothers, talk to fathers. We're going to make sure that their Ubuntu around them, room circle around them, knows the risk factors for jaundice, knows the symptoms of if things are going wrong, and that they will, they know where to get help and who to get help from. But first of all, we're coming up with all these terms in healthcare now, and it seems like they only apply, to people in power. And it's unfortunately, that often means to white people. And one of those is shared decision making. So one of the ways I address it on both ends. As a clinician, I educate my clients as to this is what may happen, and that I help them understand that with shared decision making, you have the right to, say, and I often tell them, maybe it's, well, first of all, you don't got to do anything but stay Black and die. If you want to say no, say no.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you say, I'm not saying no, I'm saying not right now.
Yeah.
And what is the alternative? We use an acronym called BRAIN. So with any intervention that someone comes in and says they want to do on them or their baby, What are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? What does my intuition as a patient or as a caregiver say, and what happens when we do nothing? So we let them have the opportunity to make the choices for themselves, number one. But then as an educator, I spend a lot of time talking to my residents. Like I said, of the 28 residents that I currently mentoring in their intern through fourth year in an OBGYN residency, and then in addition to the family medicine residents who are with me during their OB rotation, I try to make sure to educate them about these issues. Everyone knows if you don't know, and if you go look on my Twitter page, there's a pinned tweet that has a bibliography of articles that I have that talk about obstetric racism and also how it leads into pediatric racism. And if you're a parent or a patient or love someone who's of reproductive age, or you're a healthcare provider, these are the things that might help you be a better provider. So I talk with my white residents, especially, for them to understand that they should advocate from their place of white privilege, but also they should learn not to exercise their power immediately just because they can, because it's not only about the what, it's about the why. And then, looking at it at an institutional level. And one of the things I found out, and you've alluded to it, we've talked about it, is that it turns out it's actually quite financially beneficial for hospitals to keep NICU beds full. And when I first, one of the first times I went to talk with one of the institution, I thought I was going to be like, hey, I'm going to save the institution a whole bunch of money because they're not going to be putting babies in the NICU that don't need to be in the NICU. And literally having the vice president of the Women and Children's Services say that actually costs us money. Like, those beds are there, those nurses are there, whether there's babies in them or not. Our hospital, I think, has 72 NICU beds. They don't ever want it to be less than 60. They want 60 babies in the NICU every single day. Our hospital does, on average, 20 births a day. Where are you getting 60 babies if only 20 to 30 babies are born today on any given day to be in the NICU? Yes, you've got preterm babies that are there for a long time. And thank God that they have a place like, NICUs that can take, extremely preterm and micro preemies and save their lives. But here's what I found in that process. A simple NICU stay for a grower feeder, as they call them, right? A baby that just needs to be fed, that requires very little nursing care, or a baby under the bilirubin lights, right? The nurse has to do very little. You do some vital signs, couple of hours, you change diapers, but the baby's being gavage fed or, fed through an NG tube that's set on a machine. So these babies are getting very little actually hands-on nursing care. That's about $5,000 a day. One of those extremely preterm babies is more like $25,000 to $35,000 a day. So when I was talking about, saving them all this money by not having 17% of the NICU beds filled with babies that didn't really need to be there, turns out I was actually talking about taking money out of their pocket.
Exactly.
So when I had to put it to, and then one of the immediate responses was like, well, that's okay because Medicaid, quote, Medicaid pays at the same rate. That's like, okay, well, I understand that, yes, in the city of Wilmington, 60% of mothers have Medicaid, and so their babies have Medicaid, but guess what? 40% of them don't. So when you send my babies to the NICU, you're sending, and you say they have to stay there for at least 48 hours, you're costing a mother $10,000, you're costing a family $10,000, an additional $10,000 on their bill, of which they're responsible for part of it. And that might mean that they can't feed their kids next month. That might mean that they can't give their kids the clothes they need. That might mean that they're cutting back on essentials because they have to anticipate 30 days after they finally go home. This hospital is going to send them a bill, not only for a birth, but with an extra how many thousands of dollars for a NICU stay that they never really needed in the first place. So, we have to start talking with, so for us, freedom dreaming has become being advocates for, our community and being willing to say, you have to come up with a better way, because until you do, we are going to make sure that, people understand really what's going on. And if that means I have to get on the, if that means I have to call legislators, I call legislators. If that means that I have to call my congressperson, it's a good thing I've known her literally since I was in diapers, and I've got her on the phone. If that means that I have to, call the lawyer that I know who does pro bono work from her regular life for free, intervening with the foster system when families are unjustly introduced, then that's what I have to do. But first, we have to freedom dream, and we're going to say that this institution is racist. So we all agree that the people who are here now didn't build it, but you have a responsibility to build it better. And if
Right.
you can't revise it, to tear it down and start again. And, we just have the audacity to be a group of, less than 10 Black women from different backgrounds who, just said, we're just going to stand up and we're going to look them in the face and say, we start this practice from the assumption everything that we do in this practice started with the community telling us what they wanted.
Mm.
Whether it was prenatal care or midwifery care or, a clinic, a food bank, a diaper bank, all the different things that we do in this clinic and in this practice and in this, we call ourselves a community safety net, was because the community said these are the things that we need. And so, for us, freedom dreaming starts with us deciding that, and why don't more institutions decide that the community should drive the services, and if there's something wrong or broken about the services, the community should drive the change.
Community drive the services, and if it's broken or in many ways acting as designed, they should drive the change. And so I heard audacity. I love that word. Um, Courage, creativity, imagination, advocacy, activism. I love every single piece of that. And I took some notes, which I will use as the summary when we're closing out here, in terms of um, what are the freedom driven pieces as we move forward. Going back to choice or decision being a better word, I think I like how you said it starts with making a decision. Ah, what decision can I make today for different that is better? I love that question for us. I love that question for us. Let's start with our wonderful friend, Bruna Giovanni, to break down some thoughts and comments, feedback that they would like to offer. You are welcome to the roundtable. Thank you for coming back. Always love to hear you. You have 2 minutes to share your thoughts. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear your beautiful voice. How are you?
Okay. I just want to say, hi. I'm actually with everything going on, but I hope everyone else is okay. But I just want to say thank you, to you, Doctor, for always being like an ally to me and always being so nice to me. And thank you to everybody for listening. And I feel like since we're talking about blackness, I feel like it's like very it's very important to also bring up because I was actually in because I actually go to group therapy, and I feel like sometimes within communities of color, like black and brown communities, sometimes there's like fear of going to the doctor and everything like that, and then also it's like very unfortunate, but often mental health is also something that's heavily stigmatized in the community, and it's like people need to stop being shamed and for being for having like mental health disabilities. Like I'm not too proud to say I used to drink in order to cope with my pain and everything like that, and just my issues. And but it's like I was able to find like somehow just find the strength within myself and just say, I can't do this anymore, and I'm back on my psychiatric meds and everything, and I don't care if anybody laughs at me or makes fun of me, but yeah, I don't drink or I don't smoke or anything like that. I don't drink anymore, but yeah, I just feel like it should just be normalized and more should be invested into mental health services and also more. There need to be like more scholarship opportunities specifically for young black people and young so of course I don't want to be a medical doctor. I don't think I could do all that. But yeah. But but it seems like it takes a lot of talent and everything and I'm not but I feel like there should be more scholarships available specifically for young black people and also young immigrants as well who do want to um how does it pursue a career in like nursing or becoming a doctor and yeah, there should be more scholarship funds specifically for allocated for in order to break certain barriers and I feel like we just need to do that and it would just be better for the whole society as a whole, like to have more people having access to medical care and mental health services and just more other things. So yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that perspective, the normalization of mental health and mental health challenges, especially in our communities, and destigmatizing it as well is a critical piece of the entire a lot of the issues that we face. Absolutely, and unpacking the ways in which they are representative again of white supremacism and colonialism. Okay. And then also through scholarships and other funding mechanisms to incentivize young people going into healthcare, especially in mental health space, is huge. And I want to sort of tie it to our conversation today and around even part of the freedom dreaming. It's increasing representation of us, right, in these healthcare spaces, and also those of us that can also articulate the mental health implications and impact of what it means to experience systemic discrimination and anti-blackness in our spaces, right? Even through tools, devices, technologies as this Billy tool and the photo sensory machines, as many of them as exist. So thank you for really highlighting, and we talked about the trauma, right? That these experiences are incredibly traumatic, and Sister Michelle opened so many different ways that this happens, mentally, which speaks to the physical component as well. But part of that is really articulating this in our communities. And so I hope, and I'm pretty sure, that you are a great advocate for mental health and in your community, and naming it where you're at for folks to be able to understand how these things intersect, and that is critical, and to remove stigma. The more of us that talk about it, and we do that here in this space, we just sort of integrate and interweave. And we didn't really spend a lot of time on joy today. We kind of went right into the topic, but so maybe we'll end with a joy report is what we'll do. But I just want to thank you for naming the mental health piece. I want to go to Dr. Day so that we can, Sister Michelle, you and I can end in response to Dr. Day's offering and close out the space. So again, thank you so much, Bruna Giovanni. And we will go to Dr. Day for her offering. And she tweeted, so she's like, Dr. Day is a firebrand. Dr. Day will take what she learns and she will change everything in her institution. She don't play. She is a great example for anyone who's like, well, how do we do A, B, and C? Dr. Day don't waste time. She'll be like, really? Wait, you just said the Billy tool is problematic? No problem. She'll go back and be like, y'all, what do we use to measure jaundice in our babies? In what ways does it discriminate against melanated babies? So we're gonna stop this and we're gonna figure out some other alternative. She don't like the next day. And one of the things, additionally, if you didn't love her enough, is that she will come back and report to you. And I just appreciate that. It blesses my heart, Dr. Day, every time you're like, yo, let me give you a praise report, girl, so you know what you're doing is not in vain. And you don't understand. I love you so much. But go ahead before I spend the rest of the time just talking about you.
Thank you so much, Sister Ikioma. And Sister Michelle, oh my God, I can't tell you guys how timely this is for me and for our practice. I rolled over in bed because I slept in this morning, saw the
As you
said,
should.
oh
As
my
you should.
goodness, oh my goodness. So in our institution, we do a lot of early discharges. So right after 24 hours, babies go home with their moms, and then or their parents, and then. But we usually need to do a Billy check within about 2 days or so, just to make sure that things are going okay. And so institutionally, what's happened is because the tool is primarily there in the pediatrics department, those early discharge checkups at 2 days are being done in the pediatrics department in their clinic. And what we've been working on is actually getting those early discharge checks to come back to the primary care homes of those, which are many of them are family practice practices in the Department of Public Health. But we're waiting for us to get our our Billy meters in order to start doing those. And I am waiting right now for our Billy meter to be delivered. So now we're going to have a whole new discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm going to have to go back and talk to our pediatrics fellows about so what nomograms are you all using? And thank you, Michelle, for giving us those nomograms, because maybe one of the ways we start to freedom dream is to say we're not going to use one nomogram for every baby.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're going to use the nomogram the Billy meter gives us, and maybe we're going to apply one of these other nomograms from these, the tables, nomogram meaning the tables that tell you what a normal level is. Maybe we'll use those from a couple of those studies, and maybe we'll come up with a range and decide and make decisions based on that. So this is just, okay, this is one more conversation. I'm going to be having it at my institution now. Thank y'all. Very timely. Very timely.
Oh, I love that so much. And go ahead and please, as always, give your praise report. Let us know. And you just already gave me like 50 ideas. I have to I need to calm down. But yes, I'm just gonna say yes for the sake of time. Just yes. That's what I want to say. Sister Michelle, you got something to say, Dr. Day?
Yes, I'm just so. First of all, we need to talk offline, because I would love to see. We in our group support early discharge, but we have to. We're trying to negotiate with our pediatric hospitalists who do a lot of the care of the babies there, because their system is built around really around malpractice and liability. So they're so hesitant to let babies leave early. So just the idea of what if we freedom dream even further and say that we're not going to pin discharge to this tool, but we can agree that they're going to be checked by their primary care provider in 2 days. That's just, that stops a lot of the problem right there in the first place. So that's fantastic. Yeah, we just need to, for us, and I appreciate also your joy reports. I love them. Our practice is predicated on the fact that we're not looking for mothers and babies to just survive. We're looking for them to thrive.
To thrive, baby. Yes, we are here to thrive. We're here to flourish.
We claim the right to just be as a parent, enthralled and loved with being parents, and making it the norm that people often don't understand. And I always say that we're tribal people. We Black folks And I don't care if we're talking about Black folks from the Northeast, Southwest, Black folks in the Caribbean, Black folks in Africa. We love our babies.
Listen.
And we will die. We will throw ourselves in front of trains, in front of bullets.
That's right.
We'll starve. We'll do whatever. So, like, if we can just all agree on principle that these Black mothers and Black fathers that you're labeling difficult because they want the right to do the same thing that white parents do every day in this hospital, which is say no and demand to speak to the manager if they don't get the answer that they want.
That's right.
That we have just as much right to covet the care of our children and to surround them with the love of their community. And so thank you. And, one of the ways that we do that is just claiming it from the beginning. Nobody comes in here and says, please just don't let me die in childbirth and don't let my baby die before she's 5. No, we are here so our children thrive.
Yes. Oh my God. What a powerful way to round this conversation up. Thank you, Dr. Day. As always, we are looking forward to your joy report after you do what you do as a powerful leader where you're at. And Sister Michelle, I just love what you said. And I love this thing about what is the assumption I'm coming into this conversation or this topic or this engagement or interaction or what have you with. And I love how you've repeated throughout this conversation, this whole sense that, at Ubuntu, we are already coming with the assumption that our mothers want to breastfeed. We are coming in with the assumption that our parents love their children, like we all do throughout every inch of the diaspora. We are coming in with the expectation, not just this assumption, but what is my expectation, right? We have an expectation of thriving and flourishing and blossoming, right? Because we're not just survivors. We go beyond that. That's the price our ancestors paid, was for us not to just survive like many of them had to, but they did that so that we can live to thrive and prosper in abundance. Yes, and we expect that for ourselves, and we claim it, and we occupy spaces with that confidence, with that assurance. And I just love that, there. That just sort of what is our assumption, presumption, expectation in as we do this work. How are we coming into the space? And I love that. So I just wanted to lift that up because that blessed my spirit, as we close out this conversation. So thank you to everybody who's been listening, who's spoken, our wonderful family, Bruna Giovanni, Sister Curdy Wirt, Dr. Day, my powerful goddess and mentor and friend and sister, Dr. Michelle Drew, Reverend Dr. Michelle Drew, the wonderful everybody in the audience, Sister Noha, Brother Bobby, Sister Elena, Brother Brian. Thank you for teaching me and reminding me severance package. Many of you DM'd me, girl, get your vocab together. The severance, girl. Don't embarrass us on this Twitter streets. And you're right. I'll remember for next time. But it's severance was the word for those of you maybe that missed it. I was trying to find the word severance for what, when people fire people in permanent positions, I still give them a whole mess of money. So they don't really pay too much. They don't really feel the pinch of the accountability for whatever their action was that got them fired or removed. So the word was severance. Thank you for reminding your sister about that. And also I want to thank excuse me, Sister Helena, for sending the transcript. I'm gonna tweet it out, in a bit, between Ngozi Fulani and excuse me, Lady Hesse. And that conversation, that was a conversation heard around the world. That was an example of the cultural racism that we face in spaces we can't just be. Somebody always trying to put us in our place everywhere, especially when we have the nerve to show up in high places of, stature and power. And so today we've talked about yet another example of how anti-Blackness shows up inside, inside of healthcare, inside of the sciences, inside of medicine, and has a wide-ranging impact and ramifications that is informed and also informs the systemic environmental white supremacism and anti-blackness that we face on a daily basis. But we also freedom dreamed, and that's one of the things I love about this space, is that we break down and raise the awareness and the education so that we understand, and we teach ourselves language, share tools and resources, yes, and then we also dream about what is better, because that's how we be, man. We are creators, we're innovators, we're dreamers that translate to action. And so being around our people to sort of cultivate that collective imagination towards change is always just like my life, that it just gives me life. No matter how sick or tired I am, in this like few hours, I'm always so just, already have like 1,200 ideas just from this conversation opportunities. And so we talked about freedom dreaming. How do we disrupt, the ways in which devices and technologies are invented or created and then also implemented and executed and disseminated globally, that reinforces anti-blackness, reinforces white supremacism, reinforces colonialism. Okay, but how do we then do this? We talked about jaundice as a condition for which this tool or Billy check, they're all these kind of names, but they're basically photosensors that are able to detect the amount of bilirubin, a pigment that is produced in the blood, usually normally, but has their different things can go wrong in the whole like metabolism of it, where it can accumulate in a baby system and lead to damage, especially in the brain, and we want to avoid that. So in order to do that, we used to draw blood and check the amount of bilirubin and then treat, and we do that by putting them under UV lights. But then the technology was like, yeah, we don't want to poke babies, good intention. However, it relies on a photo type of technology that also doesn't account for the fact that babies come in all different shades and degrees of melanin that affect the reading and the reliability of this tool. And this tool therefore has resulted in disparate outcomes for Black and brown babies, or browner skinned babies, who have been placed socially assigned into racial categories of Black and Asian in many respects, right? But essentially are babies that are browner skinned. And it's read inappropriately higher, and then babies are then at risk of being treated or being placed in the neonatal intensive care unit inappropriately. And by the time the blood tests come back is normal, they're taken out. But sometimes they're not taken out because there's a blanket policy. You in the NICU, you're gonna stay in this NICU for two days. We don't care what. And often those policies are built on capitalist interest. They're built on interest for money. And so, what does it look like in terms of freedom dreaming to develop, right, new models? As always, everything just always goes back to the same things, of healthcare funding and of healthcare provision, period, right? That doesn't depend on sick care, right? Because as many people say, we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system, and they are not wrong. So what does that mean when we freedom dream? That must include also universal health care, and a healthcare that is disconnected from profit in a way that incentivizes terrible practices, that places people at risk of financial ruin, but also mental and physical health ruin by the ways that it works out, right? We talked about the ways that healthcare intersects with criminal justice, and the ways that when we seek to enable or equip our patients to speak up for themselves. But if you're in a Black body, oftentimes you're immediately criminalized, how things get escalated. Again, these are some of the harms and the impact for these kind of practices, right? In the ways that, again, the financial cost, but the mental health cost, the physical health cost, the separation of mom and babies, the ways it shows up by contributing to infant and maternal health mortality, right? And really speaks to the ways that when we are dealing with health and healthcare disparities, we do need to do a better job of looking inward and say, wait a minute, what are we doing to contribute to these numbers? Not what is broken or wrong in the people that they have these numbers. Just like in trauma responsive care, we change the question from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. We have to, I would say, in a anti-racism responsive care, change the questions from what's wrong with the people to wait a minute, what were you doing to contribute to what's happening with these folks, right? How are we perpetuating the harm that is producing this? So we learned a few things. Miss Sister Michelle taught us about the acronym BRAIN. This is new. I love it. It's new for me. I wrote it down. BRAIN, B, benefits, R, risks, A, alternatives, I, what is my intuition telling me, and N, what happens if nothing is done. This is an acronym for us as patients or as consumers of services, I would say. I mean, I really see the application beyond healthcare. How do we organize the ways that we respond to when we are being offered a service, so to speak? How does it benefit me? What are the alternatives? What are the risks, rather? And then what are the alternatives? What does my intuition say? And what happens if I do nothing? Very powerful. I love that. We talked about the freedom dream of, we got to retrain our healthcare professionals. We got to go back, right? Again, if the fundamental piece that needs to be removed and eliminated is race as a biological factor, we have done already 60, if not 75% of the change that needs to occur in medical training. Because even now, quote unquote, race is listed on the bilirubin. What are the risk of developing jaundice or a pathologic jaundice, meaning the jaundice that is not benign, is disease. It's going to give problems. Black is African American is listed, and that as a risk factor that then places them on a different table or nomogram, as Dr. Day, excuse me, drinking some water there, taught us, right? And how do we again remember that race or blackness is not a risk factor? Anti-blackness is the risk factor. Being black in the world or in this country particularly, but really in the world, is a risk factor. The value placed on blackness by white supremacism is the risk factor. How y'all deal with us or interact with us when we're in healthcare settings or in institutions is the risk factor. Our blackness in and of itself is not the risk factor. That needs to change fundamentally, right? How do we use different nomograms that are population or melanation based? Because again, my concern about the population, like we said, we got Black folks walking around who look whiter than Joseph Robinette Biden, okay? But they associate them, they identify as Black. So if they check Black on the box and you look at them, they're lighter than the sun, and then what do? Right? So the issue isn't the racial category. The issue is the degree of melanation. We have to start measuring what we are measuring and stop using proxies that are very, very fraught, right? We got people that don't list themselves as Black, darker than me and you. Oh, again, your girl is still working on it, right? I'm always a work in progress. I'm trying to eliminate this dark light business from my lexicon, and I did that again. Browner than me and you, deeply brown, right? And so, what does it look like to detangle these things, decouple these things that we have conflated into a mess in medicine and has produced messy ass results, right? And so that's the other piece of the freedom dreaming. How do we come up with tables or units of measurement, whatever have you, that account for the fact that babies are of different shades, and therefore that needs to be taken into consideration and doing in a way that is not more painful for the babies who are browner, whereby they're either not subjected to more painful procedures, or the procedures are created in a way that is more humane. Speaking of which, freedom dreaming solutions. How do we decouple ourselves from relying on technology that relies on amount of pigmentation or the lack thereof, to come up with to help us with diagnosis. So how do we develop, what is the science and the technology that we need to develop, that is rooted in true humanism, right? That takes into account the fact that we have a diverse skin shades, okay, regardless of the racial category that it's assigned to. But the body and the skin shows up in such beautiful diverse array of tone and texture regardless of that category. And how do we ensure that we are, if we need to use transcutaneous diagnostic tools, and what transcutaneous simply means, tools that go through the skin to do what it needs to do, right? But that has to go through the skin, that we account for the skin. We count for the skin, right? The very, like, the largest organ of the human body, that we account for the diversity of skin, and ensure that browner people are not, as usual, placed, people in black bodies, in black identities, and tend to be browner, are placed at higher risk of being discriminated against as a result of a technology that doesn't remember, is not grounded in a critical place to understand the reality of what we contend with. So again, we need to freedom dream our invention, and have the audacity. They have the audacity to do that, to be innovative and creative. And then when our people invent these things, we need to support them, right? We need to find them and support them and create the market for them and demand our institutions purchase them, right? Like, we need to increase the awareness of them. I was actually, while Sister Michelle was speaking, was going online to see, hey, I wonder, has someone already figured this out? Right? Has somebody already figured this out? So I wonder, that's the homework y'all have. Y'all have homework. You're gonna have homework today to find out, has someone already figured out how do we measure bilirubin in babies, in people, but babies specifically, that accounts for the issue with this, with that has been produced by this Billy check. I mean, the variation of up to 50%. That is not a tool that should be used when the difference in what it sees through the skin and then what actually exists under the skin is up to 50%, and there's a variance depending on the brand name. That is a sucky technology. Why are we using this and using it into the extent that we are? Ay, ay, ay. So, y'all, it has been a wonderful conversation. I've been extremely blessed, really, really so. I want to end what we didn't start with, which is just like, what's giving us joy today. Sister Michelle, what's giving you joy as we close out? And then we'll go from there.
Well, lots of things give me joy, but I'll start with, we are coming with just another 3 weeks, like you said, really, of births, and I'm off for 1 week, so I have 3 more weeks where I will be catching babies, and Abuja will celebrate its third year of having all of our mothers give birth at the appropriate gestational age, meaning that their term, with the exception of, we had a mono di twin who gave birth last week at 35 weeks, and those babies were 10-pound worth babies.
Woo!
We are claiming joy because, we're not the big fancy institution. I, am not a PI on a, NIH grants, and, but I know that what we do works, and our motto here is really simple. Ubuntu means community. We surround mothers with we describe every birth and every as like 3 circles. The first circle includes the mother, her partner, and the baby she's carrying, and her own babies, and that's that tight circle. Then the larger circle around her is, the extended family, your blood kin, and maybe a few of your best friends that you love the most. And then the bigger circle is the Ubuntu. We're the people that surround you with love. And we have 4 keys. We only do 4 things. And we say if we can do these 4 things for you, you will have a healthy pregnancy. And it has proven to be true. We insist that every mother is well fed, and that means that we assist with food, then we contribute to it, and we talk to them about, we have what we call the Eat Like Our Ancestors diet. So we really look back to Africa, we look to the Deep South, we look to the way our ancestors ate and eliminate the foods that don't look like that. We insist that they are well loved. We uplift Black fatherhood or Black partnership.
Yes.
We support same-sex families. We understand that who you love is who you love, and any system that distances and excludes your own children and your partner from your pregnancy care is diabolical. We insist that they be well rested.
Yes.
So we don't care if we need to work on finding you rental assistance, or if we need to write notes. I write lots of doctor's notes that say this mother is not working more than 32 weeks, or she's stopping at 36 weeks because I said so. Because mothers need to be well rested, and then they need to be supported. So, and that's where we come in. So just by proving that, all you need to be, you don't need to be white to have a healthy pregnancy. You don't need to, be induced collectively to not get preeclampsia. You need to be well fed, well loved, well rested, well supported. And I'm just celebrating, another year. We're closing out our 3rd full year of community-based care. And that we're only growing, and that art, and if nothing else, because of platforms that we're being given, like you giving us the space, so that people begin to know our names and know our voices. Because the credibility that I'm being given now, and the invitations that I receive, I know are because of people like you, who've given me a platform just to let my loud mouth go even further than it does. So that's my joy. My joy is that we have 112 term babies, 112 healthy moms, with no NICU admissions, with no postpartum readmissions, just 112 healthy moms who were just allowed to celebrate the joy of Blackness while they're childbearing.
Oh, girl, listen, I don't know. Woo, everything. And it's so funny that you said I'm not a principal investigator on a large NIH grant, but you out here doing the things that the principal investigators of the large NIH grants trying to study. You are literally doing it, like they wish. The principal investigators of the large NIH grants wish they could do what you're doing, right? And know what you know. And part of what I hope from this roundtable, even last what Dr. Day was saying, what she's saying, one of those 1,200 ideas was like, why why are we not collaborating more? There's so much opportunity. And so, yes, we're going to definitely talk offline for what those collaborative opportunities is too much. I mean, it's beyond. But it speaks to this larger dream for the roundtable. I think it was Dr. Day that has been like, and you, Sister Michelle, to the AMARC Institute, and like what we do, training folks coming through, and having building these sort of collaboratives and consortia that can start to really scale up these conversations to the levels they need to go to make larger, wider scale change. And those conversations are always ongoing and growing, and we're letting them sort of marinate in the ways that they should. But thank you for saying that, because your work deserves to be supported. Sister Michelle, tell people, this is the holiday season, people feeling generous, you want to donate, you want to support. How do folks find out more about Ubuntu Black Family Health Center? They want to support, they want to donate, they want to do all kinds of stuff. Tell them how to do that.
First of all, thank you so much. We are on Twitter at Family Ubuntu, and there is a pinned tweet that goes to what we call our Birth Equity Fund. So if you want to help contribute to making sure a Black pregnant person with Medicaid, or if they have commercial insurance, live at less than 200% of the federal poverty level, has access to doula care and midwifery care at no cost. You can find our GoFundMe. We are at www.ubuntucollective.org, and you can donate directly, a tax-deductible donation via PayPal. And if you are on Venmo or Good Lordy or Cash App, we are $Ubuntu Collective. And you can give one time or recurring, and we are a 501c3, so that means that it's tax deductible. And if you are in the Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania area, and you have whether it's your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, that you'd like to contribute and become part of the Ubuntu physically, please contact me, DM me, email me. I am Nubian Midwife at gmail.com. And let's take a time to meet up. And our next event is December 31st. We are having our Kwanzaa community celebration where we're going to honor 50 families and just let them have a time of joy and shower them with the things that they need to raise their babies, whether they're pregnant for children up to 1 year. So if you want to drop a one-time donation or become a recurring donor or come down and volunteer with us, please. There are so many ways, and our Ubuntu is local, but our Ubuntu is global. And we look forward to having you become a part of it.
I love that. And so I pinned to the dashboard / Nest Jumbotron the website for ubuntucollective.org, and you can see everything that Sister Michelle broke down on her site and learn more about the amazing work they're doing. And hopefully we will continue to scale up. And thank you. My joy is Black women doing the work that we do, and folks like you, Sister Michelle, folks like Sister Noha, folks like Dr. Day, and the list goes on. We have the amazing Mrs. Morgan in the audience as well, Sister Helena, and the list goes on. That doing great work. I appreciate you lifting up Black fathers. Black fathers are life, just life, and just really grateful for Black fathers and how critical they are in these conversations and in these spaces, and they've always been critical. Always, Black fathers have always been, as we know, the most involved with their children and their families, regardless of if they're married or not. Black fathers have always been the most involved with their kids, and that's so critical. And so I just want to take a moment to celebrate our Black papas out there, whether they're taking care of kids that are from their loins or not. Y'all are amazing. So thank you so much. And that's my joy. Man, my joy is us. And I'm excited for the work, and thank you just listing out all the stuff that you're doing, all your accomplishments. Like, it's amazing. Like I said, people wish they had your numbers and wish they had your impact in just 3 short years. So I'm looking forward to the collaborations that are going to come forth, and the opportunities where we can actually make you one of those NIH principal investigators. Okay. And we could do things. We could do I have the audacity of imagination and creativity that was afforded me by our ancestors. I don't play. So if we dream it, we'll do it. And so and I wish that for every single one of us in this space and the people listening on replay. And so let me go ahead and close out this space, because you already know I could go on for another day. But no, let's enjoy the rest of our Saturday with each other. Go on and have this conversation with one other person, okay, in your life. Share the recording on Twitter Space. Share it on the YouTube channel. And again, hooked up to the pin to the Jumbotron is a link to those spaces. Our website, sign up for our newsletter. We're still working on getting all those things together, but right now if you sign up, then once we have that captive audience will get the newsletters and other pieces like running. We're still building our team. Really grateful. This all started just from a dream. Hey, with everything that was going on, look, we need to have conversations, honey. We have to have the real conversations because many of the things that was happening, folks weren't saying the truth. There were things in coded language and in roundabout and all kinds of funny ways. And it's like, no, we need to start speaking our truth. You got to say your own story. We got to own our own narrative. And that was just like a couple of Twitter spaces here and there and here and there and here and there. Next thing you know, it's been over a year with this roundtable. I think it's been longer. I haven't really been keeping track. I'm not as good as you, Sister Michelle. I need to now. But I think this is the second year, which is unbelievable. And so I want to thank you all for making this community what it is. That's why Ubuntu, it's not coincidental that Ubuntu Family Black Family Health Center is part of the Roundtable family, because Ubuntu is our philosophy as well. It really is community. I swear, it's our magic sauce. It's our secret, but not so secret power. That let's keep building community and building power with each other. It's not uniformity, but it is unity, and it's critical. So let's continue learning. And the homework, I want to remind folks a couple of things. Your homework, again, which Black person is out there inventing things that we need to know about so that we can lift it up and we can start like demanding our institutions order that one, that is separating or accounting for melanin. I don't know, whatever genius that they're doing that is rooted in what things need to be rooted in rather than white supremacism and anti-blackness. So let's go find out what are the bilirubin checking tools, and if not, then baby, when y'all invent it, you better bring your sister Ijoma in as a partner, okay? So we can go ahead and build Black wealth, baby. Okay. So don't forget your sister, that you heard it here first. If nobody's working on it, then let's work on it and get those grants and make that money for us. Anyway, second reminder is, again, next Saturday is our last AMART for the year, y'all. So I will do a better job of publicizing so that we get more folks in space. It's gonna be a celebration, is what it's gonna be. It's gonna be a celebration, and so really excited. We'll try to get as many folks around the round table, and it's just gonna be like a free, like, virtual kitchen table conversation. I'm gonna invite y'all to make sure you will bring your eggnog. I don't know what eggnog. I still don't know what that thing is, but I hear about it, and your other beverages, your cheesecake and your other kinds of cake and every kind of cake. I'm a cake person. And your food, your jollof rice and your fried chicken and your fried fish and your collard greens and your what do we eat? Do we eat? Yeah, sweet potato pie and all those things. It will just have it be just a beautiful gathering and a celebration as we close out the year, because the following Saturday the 17th, I'm out of town presenting in Chicago on work that we're doing, anti-racist work, at a School of Medicine. And the next is Christmas Eve, and then the following Saturday is New Year's Eve. So we want to take that time and be with each other. And I want to rest. I love that Sister Michelle said, you need to be well rested, baby. And look, you ain't saying nothing but the truth. So I want us to go out there, I want you to be well loved, well fed, baby, okay? Well rested, well supported. Yes. The same secret, not so secret sauce of Ubuntu Black Family Health Center applies to us too, and especially the feeding part, okay? And with that, I just want to say I love you. Go out there, love each other, love yourselves, build community, and build power.
I say, and amen.
And amen. I was about to play this music, but I'm not I suck as a DJ. That was the other thing I was not supposed to do in this life. Was a DJ, and I was gonna. I turned off what you call the window. So we'll listen to music next time. But we're already past time. So hey, Y'all already know how to use the YouTube. Go ahead and do that. Enjoy yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Much love. Bye bye.
Bye, all.